Still on the issue of borders, a political analyst says the border crisis that's arisen in South Africa of late over border control in South Africa for Lesotho nationals is a fight that won't be won anytime soon. Victor Shale says the borders in themselves are firstly nonsensical, but that from time immemorial, herd boys from Lesotho have been taking their cattle across the Caledon River into South Africa for greener pastures, and even taking a ride on the cars if the river is full. His opinion is on the back of growing concern as immigration and law enforcement officials struggle to keep illegal movement from the Mountain Kingdom at bay amidst a second wave of COVID-19 in South Africa. Victor Shale is the principal consultant at Shalestone, and he joins us now. Very good evening to you, and thank you so much for speaking to us. So perhaps if you could just give us your views about what you're seeing in the media, saying that it's being portrayed as if there's tight security on the Lesotho SA borders, but you're saying that no amount of soldiers or law enforcement officers will deter people from living freely in the land of their fathers. Why?
Thank you for having me on your program tonight. Look, I think we are dealing here with a bigger problem. We are dealing here with the legacy of colonialism. The restriction of movements, the compartmentalization of people into spaces that deprive them of their livelihoods. It's a history-long problem. And so what I'm basically expressing in the quote you just read now is basically saying that listening to, for instance, the Home Affairs Minister, Honorable Motsoaledi, talking tough that people won't be allowed. There is a crisis. We are dealing here with a crisis at the Mozambique-South Africa border as we speak. People have been there for days without water and food. Similar stories are coming out of border between Lesotho and South Africa. And it's the same thing even with the Eswatini and Zimbabwe. So this is a problem. The problem is simply just escalated by the COVID-19 pandemic. But I think we would be deceiving ourselves if we limit this to being a problem resulting from people having or not having COVID-19 certificates. It is a bigger problem which the leadership within the SADC region, especially South Africa as the big brother, to put it for lack of better words, has not been able to demonstrate leadership to deal with the whole issue of integration in the region. SADC speaks about regional integration. African Union speaks about regional integration and free trade and all those kind of things. The reality, Tsepiswa, is that the whole continent over, no one can stop people from moving from one place to the other in the continent. People will migrate. There are push and pull factors.
Okay, let's talk about those push and pull factors. The government is currently working on a one-stop border policy at the moment, looking at the 72 ports of entry to streamline it. So what are those push and pull factors? I mean, if you say it comes naturally for people who would, for instance, regard a part of South Africa, say the Free State, as very much a part of the Mountain Kingdom's territory, so they would not then see themselves as breaking the law.
Yes, people don't regard themselves as breaking the law. In my studies when I was doing my master's degree, I did a study between Lesotho and the Eastern Cape and KwaZulu-Natal. And I've also done studies elsewhere on the continent. I mean, if you look at what is happening between Kenya and Somalia, and what is happening between Eritrea and Ethiopia, it's the same story. Leaders are basically lazy to come up with working solutions, and they then throw use of force to the problem. That is the problem. The reality is that, just a while ago, the Director General of Home Affairs was saying that just at the Maseru border alone, they were processing over 4,000 travelers between Lesotho and South Africa. This is just at one border or one border post. And so the reality is that most of those people would be having one form of employment or the other in South Africa. And it applies across the region. People had gone home, they need to come back to their jobs, they need to continue their livelihoods. This is the problem that is not being addressed. Now, the reality is the entire Southern African region and the entire continent is simply found wanting when it comes to dealing with the public health emergency. Countries are working in silos. It would seem that South African authorities, for instance, think that if they close the borders, then there will be necessarily a reduction of COVID-19. The reality is that if you stop people from moving through the legal borders, they are going to pursue illegal means to
And I want us to focus on that, Mr. Shale. Poor infrastructure we've seen in the past has been blamed for the high levels of illegal movement between countries. Is it that, or is it also as a function, as you mentioned, poor controls and weak management, and what can be improved?
First of all, the region needs to be in unison to finding, jointly seek solutions. I agree, for instance, with what the minister is saying that, other countries have to do their bit. But there has to be leadership, there has to be coordination and collaboration in, for instance, dealing with the backlog that you find at the border posts because of old or outdated infrastructure to facilitate free movement of goods and of persons. So that is something that does not get adequate attention within the SADC setup. Secondly, the COVID, we've had almost now an entire year to come up with collaborative strategies to dealing with this public health emergency. But countries are still dealing with it in silos. So it doesn't matter how much South Africa does. So long as Zimbabwe, Botswana, Eswatini, and Lesotho are ill-prepared, this is not going to help, unfortunately, to curb the spread of COVID-19 in South Africa. So South Africa is not safe by closing the borders, as has been happening in the future.
It's such a pity that we've run out of time, Mr. Shale, but hopefully at some point we delve deeper into this thing that you're talking about. As we know, the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement has come into effect. It did on the 1st of January. So to talk about that, border controls and so-called territorial integrity, how you work around that, especially if you're trying to improve the lot of people through trade and better integration. Thank you so much for speaking to us. Victor Shale is the principal consultant at Shalestone. So we're going to take a quick break. Do stay with us.